Okay, hi. If you're joining us online or watching the recording, thanks for coming. This is the May edition of Data Toboggan's user group slides preparation. Really sorry that it didn't happen in April, but there was a whole load of crazy stuff going on, and we just couldn't get it organised in time. So thank you for coming today, and thank you for watching on the YouTube channel later on. Tonight we've got Irfan Maroof, who's doing us DataOps in Azure Synapse Analytics. And Irfan, away you go. This is all yours.
Yeah, thank you. And I will start with my brief introduction, a few words about me, and then we can go to the topic. My name is Irfan Maroof. I'm part of Microsoft Global Black Belt team for advanced analytics and looking at different customer in EMEA region, and working with warehouse and the big data from some time, and representing like a mainly has like a analytics architects into from Microsoft for the different customers, right? And today topic is really important and interesting for me. Like I used to work traditionally where like there was no concept of the DataOps, right? And it was more like a traditional or the manual way where you have to promote your code not through proper automation, but just through like a manual process from one environment or stage to another, right? And I'm working with the DataOps or the DevOps from some time, like almost last 4 or 5 years, not only for the analytics, but also for the machine learning part. And today topic is specifically with respect to the agenda, we are trying to cover the few things. I'm briefly going to discuss about like what is DevOps and the DataOps difference, right? And when we are going towards more like a DataOps, what are the common approaches to implement the database changes, right? It's there are a couple, and we will discuss like which are already there, and even in a Synapse is like a is a service or the technology like a stack that provides you capability to do the different things from not only for the warehouse but also for the big data engineering, data ingestion, and also something for visualization, right? So it encapsulates a lot of things, right? So to do all the automation or the DevOps for it, you need to adopt different approaches here, right? So I'm going to that's why I brought this topic here, right? And then we will specifically go into the Synapse analytics and discuss the 4 parts that I see, or when I discussing with the customer, I keep them separate, right? Might be few of them you have already heard, right? Even through this forum, right? Or through other forum, like when we talk about the Synapse space or the Synapse CI/CD, right? Or Synapse SQL. And I also heard there was a previous talk also on a SQL serverless, but today I'm going to discuss a slightly different approach, right? And so it might be easy for you to adopt it, right? And I have also discussed same approach with a different customer, right? If time will allow, I'm also going to discuss something about like there are the few IDEs available, like there's a SQL Server Management Studio, a UData Studio, like or the Visual Studio, right? And when it's come to the Synapse, as I said, it's not like a tool for doing this one things. It's for analytics, like looking from encapsulating a lot of things. So you need to mix and match few things, but there I think we have covered good with also the IDEs. So I'm going to suggest you, if time will allow, like how you should approach it, right? And the last, if time again allow, I will spare some time for the question and answer, right? On also, if depending on the time, we will try to hit some best practices. And even throughout this session, I'm trying to cover what I have learned working with the different customers, and also learning from the different other colleagues what they are doing with the customers, and how this is already some of the best practices that I have seen implementing with the customers and myself to try different things, right? Going forward, right? So I'm just going to stop my video, but if there would be any question during the session, just let me know or put it in the chat, right? And we can see when we can actually address that, right?
Irfan, would you be okay if I just broke in with a question, if there were any?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll just keep an eye on the queue.
Good. So yeah, so let's start with the DevOps. Like this is a classical definition of the DevOps. Like it's a union of people, process, and the products, right, to enable continuous delivery of the value to your end users, right? And it's a cycle that we see. Like you start with a plan, and then you actually plan and then develop something, test it, deploy it, right? And through operation and the monitoring, you come back to this circle, right? It's a continuous delivery process, right? That's going to work forever if you want to give high quality software or something, a product to your end users. That's how this DevOps works, right? And it's combination of the different things. Today we are only going to focus on one part of it, but it doesn't mean the other parts are not important, right? But this definition I only brought so that I can discuss how it is different from the DataOps, right? If we go directly to the after the DevOps, like what is the DataOps, right? And DataOps, if from its definition, it's like actually orchestration of people, process, and the technology, right? So you see, it's the same things, right? But to deliver like a trusted and high quality data, right, to your data citizen, and in a really fast way, right? So that's how the from the definition perspective it looks, right? But with the power of automation, right, DataOps tackles a lot of things, right, that are more associated with inefficiencies in accessing the data, preparing and integrating, right? So sometimes it looks like it's easy to do these steps, right? But without like automation and these things, these processes and these things, like either accessing the data or the preparing it in a way that's accessible to the end consumers or the business users, it takes more than the required time, right? So that's why it's slightly different. And a few years ago there was like the DataOps actually well defined by one of this organization with the name Data Kitchen, right? So if you haven't seen this article, I highly recommend you to look. And why I recommending you, because sometime if you just go with the mindset of the DevOps, you can achieve something also with the DataOps, but it would not be same level, because you sometimes there is a duality of like things here, right? It's not only the code, right? It's more related to also the data. That's even if you see here the value pipeline, that actually what it takes the raw data, right? And then you have some data pipeline, that's your well-tested code. It's have all the analytical things that you want to apply on your data. You apply that, and then you get the value from it, and that's your end consumers are accessing. So it's a one horizon of this, right? And if you see from the other side, there is another part on it, right? And that's the innovation pipeline, right? And in innovation pipeline, it's actually your analytical pipelines, right, that you develop. It's a code. And in innovation pipeline, you are using a sample of your data, right? And then you changing some analytical pipeline and providing it into the for the different stages where you develop it, you test it, and then promote that into the production, right? And once it's in production, right, then your pipeline is innovation pipeline is static, but the data is changing, right? But when you are innovation in innovation pipeline, your code is changing, or analytical pipelines are changing, but your data is static, right? So that's a slight difference, right? So if you see there is a slight duality, it's not only for the orchestration part, but it's also for the testing part, right? When you are testing the innovation pipeline, you keep the static data, but changing the code, and this is a separate things. You are doing one sort of orchestration here. But when you go to the value pipeline, you keep the same analytical application or analytical pipeline, but it has the new data coming, different form of the data coming. That's slightly different, right? So even for the testing and orchestration, there is a slight duality, and that's you need to take care when you are working with DataOps, right? And for that perspective, I highly recommend to go through this article. If you haven't already seen, it's a really common. I see most of the folks are already aware of these concepts, right? But just if you haven't seen, it's good to have a look to this article, right? And today, even we are just going to touch the innovation pipelines and with respect to specific Synapse, right? And now when we have agrees, okay, the DataOps is slightly different, right? The most common questions we see are we see like how developers' life is going to change when they work with the database and the DataOps thing, right? So, and even when they need to work with they are working with data, right? They actually look for what are the approaches, right? Because it's not only the code, it's more than that. And it's also the way we get the tooling with the data technologies that we use are not at the level if you see with respect to if you're just developing the application, right? Sometimes you need to depend on the database specific you are working. Sometimes you need to get some open source tool to help you, right? But if we just talk about like a how and why it's different, slightly I'm going to touch about like what is the development life cycle of the database, right? What you do usually, you create a database, you build like some sort of like schemas, tables there, some programming related things like a store procedure. You keep everything and you store into the database, right? And once you do that, right, in historically, right, how it used to work, you were working into a database live mode, right? So you were directly working into the database and your source of the truth was only that database that holds your whole code, right? But with the advancements and also new technologies that were working also for application development, things has improved, and even the database development has slightly have changed, and now the things into the database have the similar things as it used to be there for application development, and even the development things have changed, and where you keep even your code related to database into the source control is, and I'm not so like a, it's already like a well developed approach, right? Still, right? So I am just when I'm comparing really like a now with a really long time ago, right? So it was like a now even most of the organizations and most of the developers are well versed with it, right? And it's already, I would say, well adopted. But when a new technology comes or a new service comes, right, we need to see if that can work in a similar fashion, right? So to going back, right? So now with the mixing of the same approaches that were available for the application development, you can also use similar for the database development, right? And for that thing, when we talk about like how the we can implement the database changes, there are the two common approaches, right? One is more declarative or the state-based approach, right? Where developer just specify the end state of the database, right? It tells, okay, this is my schema, how it should be looked and how it should be like into my production or the test environment, right? And there are some tools that works in a declarative manner, and one of them is a SQL Server data tools that is integrated into the like Microsoft Visual Studio. Also now in a Visual Studio Code, there is an add-on you can use it, and also in a Data Studio, right? So it's there, and they like has a in Data Studio and the Visual Studio Code, it's available only as a database project, right? But SSDTT was available originally in Microsoft Visual Studio, right? But this SSDT tool, right, or the database project, right, it works in a way where you just define your end state and just then tell that the tool or the technology that's actually the SSDT, it's work for you to deploy your code incrementally onto the target environment, right? And on the other side, like a more like a migration-based approach, where developer with help of some tools and technology develop a code that's actually can be deployed incrementally, right? Or has a full code from your dev environment to the into the production. And the reason for bringing both these things here is, right, we already know like a SSDT tools work with the most of the Microsoft database, like a SQL Server, I use SQL, right, and the Synapse dedicated part, right? But we are going to see how it's work with the SQL Server as, right? And if it doesn't work with the SQL Server as, like what is the approach for us to the SQL Serverless, right? And there are also some open source tools, right, that can help you to do migration-based the deployment, right? This is something like a SQL change automation, DB app, like also I think there is another tool with the name Flyway, right? But there are also some other Java-based tools that can help you to do this migration-based approach for deploying your code from one environment to the another, right? So going to the next thing where I just want to hit, okay, if we are talking about specifically the Synapse, right? This is one of the Synapse reference architecture, and I want to show, okay, when we are talking about the deployment for the different parts, like we usually have some sort of the ETL part that's either in a Spark, right? We have some Synapse pipeline for orchestration, right? But in addition, we have some code into the dedicated pool and also into the Spark, right? So we are going to cover how these 4 parts that I initially even pointed into the agenda, right? How to deploy the few things, either the notebooks where they are going to be covered, where is the orchestration or the Synapse pipeline things are going to come, where is the dedicated pool, what is going to come there and how it's going to be deployed, and the serverless. And today, even I'm going to be more focused and want to spend more time with the serverless and the Spark part, because I think personally the other 2 parts, like a dedicated and somehow the workspace, is well covered into our documentations, right? And it was similar to other things. For example, what we do for the dedicated is similar to if you have database development for SQL Serverless, Microsoft SQL Server, right? Or for Azure SQL, and for Synapse pipeline or the workspace, it's also similar to, if I can say, might be to the data factory. It's not exactly same, because in Synapse we have more things. Synapse workspace we have more things than to the data factory pipeline, but from the concept wise, it's a similar things where you deploy the ARM templates from the dev environment to the test or the production, right? And this is just like a different type of artifacts which we can get from these different parts, right? For example, from Synapse Workspace, you get all the things that you have, for example, pipelines, data sets, data flow, right? I'm not going to take the name of all, but these are the things that everything you develop into the workspace is part of there, and you can promote from there to the another environment. And that's what covered into the Synapse workspace deployment thing, right? So if you save in the scripts, right, it's there, and you can promote from there to the one environment to the another, right? In SQL part, right, this is not the artifacts initially, but if you look anything that exists into the Synapse SQL dedicated pool, that's we covered into the Synapse SQL part of the CI/CD of the Synapse, right? And here it's all the definition of your table, external table, all the code that you have within the database, right? Because that's not going to be part of the workspace. And for solving this solution, there's this problem, like you need to use like a SQL Server data tools or like a database projects, right? And these database projects then bring all your definition and this related code from your the development database or from your production database into your initially to your local projects, local database projects, and from there even you can promote, actually commit into the Git, and from there you can promote into the different environment, right? In addition, if we see the what is covered in a serverless, anything that you save into like these meta stores that only store the definition of databases, for example, your external table definition, your view definition, right? That's more like this Hive rated, similar to things like if we call it like a Hive metastore, right? So with both like a serverless and also Spark can access these databases, right? But you need to see like, okay, this is slightly different from this one, right? So at the moment, like this path is what we classical C has a MPP system, but this is slightly different. It's just store your definitions, and it doesn't contain your data in it, right? So that's like to extract these definition and to do the CI/CD for it. I'm going to discuss how we can do that, right? And then the last part of it, right, is a Synapse Spark, right? And in a Synapse Spark, like if you are just working with notebooks or Spark jobs definition, you might don't need to go for this part, right? Because this is more for where you have some dependencies, you need to install some more packages, right? or if you are developing some custom package, either it's a wheel package or the jar files, right? So if you want to develop those custom packages, and if you want to deploy that, then you also need that, right? Because in Synapse Workspace, we only cover like a notebooks and the Synapse Spark job definition, right? But if you need to know, if you want to do more with the custom code or with developing some packages, then you also need to look into this part, like that's the Synapse Spark part. Let's start with the first one. It's as I said, it's Synapse Workspace, right? So you have ability in a Synapse Workspace to connect it with the GitHub or the DevOps repo, right? And then everything that's exists into Workspace is committed as a code into these Git repos, right? And in these Git repos, it's everything is in a JSON format, or we can call like ORM templates, right? And from there, we have like this task into the DevOps. By using that task, you can deploy from one or promote your code from one place to the another, right? And it's, as I said, it's a slightly different from the Data Factory, because here we have more things than what we have into the Data Factory. So it's required for you to use like the DevOps task that actually built for the Synapse instead of using the Data Factory task, right? And the usual flow of the Synapse Workspace is similar to Data Factory, right? Or we can even say Data Factory is slightly more advanced, because there we have also the automation when we need to publish it. Here we still don't have it, right? But if we just cover like what is a flow, like a developer is working in their own branch, once they are done with their changes, they try to create a pull request to the master, or this is what we call the collaboration branch. And from collaboration branch is the only branch from which you can actually publish your code into the dev Data Factory, the dev Synapse pipeline or the Synapse Workspace, right? And this is the right side is all is your within the service, and here on the left side, everything you do into your Git, right? And once it's actually this manual process where you actually do with button like a publish, right? Once you do that, your code is going to be published into the Dev Synapse Workspace. Once it's there, it also does like it's instead of publishing into the publishing into the Dev Synapse Workspace, it's also published into the another branch that's like a publish branch, right? So and from this branch, you can use all the artifacts that come as your release management, right? So these artifacts like that are the ORM template, right? Those are deployable, right? So you can from there you can deploy them into your test environment or the test Synapse Workspace or into the production one, right? So, but this cover all the artifacts that I have shown into the one of the previous slide, right? Everything, pipelines, some data sets, all those things are covered, right? And there, but still we need to make sure if we assume there is already a test Synapse Workspace exists there, right? You can also do with your ORM template. You can also add those into your deployment process, right? But through this one, it's not covered, right? So you can create that, but the one that's by default it's not covered. So you have to beforehand create a dev or the test or the prod workspace where you can also create some clusters for the Spark or the dedicated pool, right? So it's important to do this beforehand so that your deployment is successful when you move from one environment to another, right? And you can manage that all with the code and ORM templates. It's there, but by default, these things covers only all the artifacts and that I have shown in one of the previous slides. Yeah, so this is the workspace part. The second is SQL part, where we have this dedicated SQL pool, right? And this is supported with the DT tools, right? And these tools, this tool is a really nice, and just to highlight what exactly it do for you. This tool provides you capability to bring your code either from another developer database or from the production database. You can compare the code with your local code with that one, and also you can completely bring your whole schema from any database into your local database project, right? And from there you can commit into the Git, right? And once you commit it, right, you can even build it, right? And as a result of the build, you get this beautiful things that we call like a deck pack, right? And that's a deployable thing, right? And that what it does, if deck pack checks all dependencies for you. For example, if there is a stored procedure and if it is referring to a specific table, it will check if that table also exists, right? So it makes sure all the dependencies are also meeting before actually deploying to the another environment, right? So that thing it's really efficient for the whole deployment process, right? And it's for the SQL Server and also for the Synapse. This is a really cool tool if you want to do with the use for the deployment, right? And in addition, you can even going into the build pipeline, you can check this on your local tool or IDE which you are using. Either you are using Visual Studio or the Visual Studio Code, right? You can just build it and see if there is any error or something wrong. You can check it, and then if there is issue, you can fix it beforehand, right? And it's at the back end, it's using this SQL package routine, right? And it is like when we are using it into even to the DevOps task, right? It's using this package, and by using this package, it's do the same thing, right? It can extract your code, and it can also actually build your code, and in the form of the deck pack, you can then move from one place to the another, right? Now, when we have seen like, okay, we have covered like a workspace, the dedicated pool, and I was slightly rushing for both the topic because I assume they are well covered, and you can find a lot of stuff related to that into either on Microsoft channels or some other from the MVPs, right? They are also discussing this and doing into the different through different forums, right? And this next part is like Synapse SQL serverless part. One of the things, right, might be you are already aware of it, right? Serverless part so far is not supporting like a SSDT support. In the current offering, SSDT is not supported, right? And to make it and discuss like the most common question we get from the customer, like, okay, then what is the best practices or what is the solution even to deploy it from one environment to another? Because when customers started working with it, they find it useful, right, for doing all ad hoc analysis or looking directly to the data lake, querying it, right, and doing different things. Once they start developing things, they come up with a lot of codes, a lot of like external tables, views, and all those things, right? And once they develop it, they want to actually move from one environment to another so that in from production or the test, their end consumer can directly access the data lake and do different things, whatever they want to do it, right? And for that, the first thing is required is to move your code into the Git repo, right? And either it's DevOps, UDevOps, or the GitHub, right? So you need to find a way to do that, right? And I'm going to discuss how you can do the how you can get the code and push it into the Git repo, right? So that's the first task when we are thinking about like how to deploy your serverless code. Because if you were just working in a workspace, you are either writing code into the Synapse Studio, right? So your code is either saved there or either saved into this Metastore who have all your definitions, right? So far your code is there, right? And you can think some developers even prefer working in a way that they just develop the code without directly writing into the database, right? But if you don't follow that practice, might be you need to find a way how to extract this code and then push it into the Git repo, right? And even if you are more familiar and was using SSDT tools, which were giving you this ease, like you don't need to think about how to bring this code because it was generating or extracting everything from you from a database as a schema and storing it into your local database projects that you were able to commit into the Git repo. So this thing is slightly different. And for that, there are the two options that we have figured out. I have discussed with my different colleagues, right? These are the two approaches. I even see another, as I said, another session on the same forum, right, where they're discussing how to deploy the serverless part, right? And this is with using this DB up thing, right? And that's also the one way, right? So you can either adopt that one, and if that worked for you, it's good, right? But for when I was looking, I start looking to the two things, and one of them is like this DBA tool that's worked for the SQL Server from the it's this really familiar tool, right? It's a PowerShell utility, right? That you can use it, right? And we have also a blog post to it, right? How to use that with a Synapse, right? And what it gives you, for example, with that tool, you can connect to the SQL Serverless database and can extract all the definitions, right? You can get the external table definition, UDF definition, stored procedure definition, and the view definition. You can extract it, right? And even to make it more like a reliable, you can even extract with the extra protection, right? You can say, okay, I need this definition, but make sure if the table is already exists, right? You can just set one of the parameter, and it will give you like also checking if the table already exists, right? First drop it, and then it's to recreate it. And I'm going to discuss in a couple of seconds why it's important to drop and then recreate, right? In this scenario, right? There is another option, right? For example, if you don't want to use this PowerShell utility, right? Because this PowerShell utility, even though it can work with a serverless database, it still can't extract your external sources. For example, anything related to external data source, external this file format, right? This is not possible to extract with this DBA tool, right? So for that, you have to find another way, right? So even though I have discussed this into this approach, right? So you can mix and match, because the other approach I'm going to discuss, you can mix and match this approach and the PowerShell utility approach, and then build your solution. It depends also on your way of the development. If you like always to stay within the database, writing direct code within the database instead of either storing it into the Git or your local database projects as a SQL script, right, or into the Synapse Studio. If you don't like doing that, I think you can still use this utility and extract all your definitions for time to time, and then commit that definitions into the Git repo for the deployment to the another environment, right? And I have developed, with the help of my colleague, a simple script that can help you to extract all those. And if someone is required, I can share with them, right? The other approach is you can start developing your code into the Synapse Studio, and there you can into the SQL script, you can start writing code as a just storing it there, right? Because whatever you store has a SQL script into the into the Synapse Studio. And what we have seen in a first approach, where we in a workspace deployment, all your scripts that you have it here is actually committed into the Git repo, right? So it's already being committed. What if you have connected your Synapse Studio workspace with the Git? So everything that you are going to write here and commit it, it's going to be moved as an ARM template there, right? So that's the other way. Like you can start writing the code, but when you are trying to go with this approach, you need to be slightly careful, because as I said, there is a dependency that we need to manage it, right? And for that, we need to be slightly extra protective when we are even writing the code, right? And those things I'm going to discuss now, what we need to do. And one of them is if you are writing external tables, we know external table, either you can create it or drop it. There is no alter statement for the external table, right? So for that, even if you are creating external tables, you should also mention a drop statement for the external tables, because otherwise, whenever you have the changes, it's not going to be executed from any utility when you want to promote from one environment to another, if that external table already exists into the target database. To make sure, you should always write a drop statement for that external table, or even the same would be for the data source and the file format, right? And even you are doing that for these external tables, you still need to manage a specific sequence, right? Because you need to see your master key is being used as a database scope credential. Your database scope credentials are being used as a data in a data source, right? So there is a dependency, and your data source is being used in, and the file format is being used into the external table definition. So there is a dependency. So you need to drop them in a specific order, and that's what I have covered in this script that I have write into the PowerShell. So once you write this definition, right, just follow like this folder structure, name it like a serverless, right, and then keep drop statement into one of the folder, external into the another one, right, and also the security definition, right, credential key or database scope credential into the separate folder. Just follow this hierarchy, right, and then by using this PowerShell script, and what this PowerShell script is doing, it's simply parsing those templates that you already have committed into the GitHub, and then extracting the SQL definition from it into specific order that's executable and deployable into the target database, right? That's what this whole SQL PowerShell script is doing, right? And yeah, if we go quickly to the next thing, right? Once you actually extract this and build this SQL script, right, you can use these two utilities that are PowerShell utilities, right? Invoke SQL command and this SQL CMD utility, right, to test your code, right? If you are from your local machine, right, or even your DevOps pipeline, if you want to test it, you can test it from there, right? But the only thing we need to think about, like, okay, with these utilities, authentication method is only supported as a SQL authentication, right? But for your overall deployment, this is not necessary. This is just for the testing. If you need it, you can use these utilities. But the way I'm using is I'm still using the same same package, right? That was for the not the package, the DevOps task that was being used for the deployment of the DAG pack, because that can also work to deploy your SQL script, right? So we will generate this SQL script through the PowerShell script that I have it here, right? From extracting this JSON, I will generate a SQL script, right? And that SQL script, we will use it into this task, right? That's in a the DevOps pipeline, and from there you can deploy it into the target environment, right? And just it's the same database deployment task, right, that we use for the DAG pack. But here, instead of providing a DAG pack with, you can tell it like, okay, I want to use the script, right? So you can say my deployment type is a SQL script. This I have got from the classical editor of the DevOps pipeline, but I have everything in a YAML pipeline. So if someone interested, I'm going to share, and we are even trying to make we make sure that this is also part of a one public Git repo where everybody who is interested can get it from there and use it, right? And so for the serverless, what we have discussed so far, I just want to summarize quickly. You can either use this DBA PowerShell utility to get directly connect to your Metastore. That's for the serverless, right? Get all the definition and then commit that definition into the Git, and has a SQL script, right? And then that SQL script is going to be used by this task and it's going to be deployed, right? The only thing you need to be careful again in this way is like there should be order. But if the PowerShell script I have developed is already taking care of it, right? So it will only generate in a specific format, and it will also going to generate in a with this extra protection, where it's going to look if there is already a table exists as external table, it first need to drop that and then need to recreate it, because if you have made some changes into your dev environment and you want to promote that, if you don't drop that, it's not going to actually change, because you can't do the alter. But in case of the views, you can write simply the alter view statement in your code and try to extract it, right? And yeah, and then that script is, you can provide it here and it can work for your deployment, right? This just summarize my serverless part. I'm quickly going to show like what I want to touch the Synapse Spark part. But if there is any question, we can address it now, specifically from serverless side. If not, we can leave it till the end.
We don't have any questions in the chat at the moment. Thank you, Irfan. I think everybody's just like quite stunned at the quality of what you're presenting for us. So I think everybody's good at the minute.
Okay.
Cool.
So moving forward, like there's another thing like a Synapse Spark. Also, I have mentioned already, like if you are developing only the notebooks and those notebooks are not using any custom codes or something related to that, you might don't need to do this deployment part for the Synapse part. But what we highly recommend, and if you were in past was a user of more like a Databricks, right? It was also a recommendation, like instead of developing everything into notebook, it's good to develop the package, right? And why it's good, because they are easy to test, right? You can write a reusable code. I even have seen somehow like you can do similar things even with the notebooks, but still it's not at that level. But if you want to make sure your code is with a high quality, right, and you want to make it reusable, right, and even easy to move from one environment to another, right, even though your notebooks moving is not an issue, right, but the most important thing is if you want to make it with a high quality of the code, it's important to develop something like a these packages. Either it's a Python packages or the Java packages or the Scala packages, right? You can develop it and then deploy that into the Synapse workspace, right? So even the one best practice is like just keep a lightweight code or like a more like a DAO related code into your notebooks, and the rest of the things where you have the whole transformation, right? Do that thing into your packages, right? And even you can do, because even the Spark that exists into the Synapse is open source, right? So you can develop that into your local machine using the open source Spark, build that packages on local machine, test it, right? Once you are good, like with all the things you want to do it with that, with all the testing, you can deploy as a package from your first committed into your Git repo, and from where from there you can deploy it into the different stages, right? And another thing, like this allow you capability to run unit test out of workspace, right? So has like sometimes you don't need to use any cluster from the Synapse side. You can do it on your local machine. You can do it on there, right? And it also, in other words, like a make your development slightly faster, right? But it's sometimes it's more depend like from where, if you are more coming from a software development background doing data engineering, you like this approach, right? I know sometimes if you are more like a SQL developer, you might not going to like it, right? So you can still stay into the notebooks and try to do the things there, right? But this is just like a best practices that we recommend. Might be how I feel it's also well adopted into the industry. Most of the data engineers like building the packages, testing outside the workspace, right? And so that it's once it's actually deployed, it's well tested code, right? And also it increases like collaboration, because your package is available to everyone if someone else is wanted to use it somewhere else, right? And to making this really real, what we allow is like your notebook is already version control that you have seen into the Synapse workspace side, right? In addition to that, we provide the Synapse CLI and the REST APIs, right? And I recommend using the Synapse CLI to do all this automation. It can allow you to actually move your these custom packages into the Synapse workspace. From there, you can also deploy them into specific pool, right? In addition to that, if you want to update your configuration of your Spark pool, sometime you need a package from another repo. You can also do like a requirement.txt. You can also change into different environment, or build something standard that is you can move from one environment to another. So that's also possible with the Synapse CLI. So use Synapse CLI or REST API to do your automation work through this DevOps pipeline. And in our sample code, we also using the Synapse CLI, right? I recommend you to use this one. REST API is also good, but it's slightly like you need to build all the this complete JSON related things that you want to push it as a your response or for the deployment, right? But the CLI is a simple and it's really nice. So if you want to do the automation for deploying these either packages or any requirement that you usually have in a requirement.txt or you can do it with this CLI, and from one environment to other, it's easy to move, right? And yeah, so it's the same thing. Like, yeah, so we have like a workspace package CLI command, right? So that uploads your jar packages into the Synapse workspace, right? This is the first step for example, when you need to deploy a custom package into the Synapse Spark pool, the first thing you need to make sure is that package is actually available as a workspace package, right? That's the first thing. And with using this command, you can make it, right? After that, you can actually deploy that from that workspace to different pool. You can use again the CLI, but it can deploy um, deploy into the specific pool, right? So it's there. And in addition, we have this REST API, right, for the data plane. So it can also help you to do the same things like upload custom libraries, configurations, and the requirements. So, yeah, so you can do it depending on your preference. You can use either the CLI or the REST API. I recommend to use Synapse CLI because it's yeah, it's ease of the use, right? And you need to like the code is really efficient as compared to the REST API, because you need to build all the complete response and things that you need to send it into your through the REST API. I quickly now want to show a few things from the pipelines, right? And let me quickly show like these pipeline. One of them is for the serverless part, and which is simply using this in build pipeline. What it is doing is it's getting this PowerShell script, right? And by using that PowerShell script, right, it is actually extracting all those SQL from it, right? And then those SQL script that are going to be extracted is going to be published as your build pipeline, right? So this build pipeline is have a simple step: extract the SQL code, right? And then once it's like extracted, right, push it from there into as a script, which is actually the comes with a name like a serverless underscore SQL script, right? And you can then publish it as your artifacts, right? And then the release pipeline, which actually going to take that code, right, and going to deploy it into the another environment, right? So it is simply deploy SQL serverless job, right? And that's here, right? So it's using the same, as I said, same task that is available for the deployment of the dedicated pool deck pack, right? So using the same, right? And instead of deploying a deck pack, we are telling it, okay, now you need to do the SQL thing, right? And you can also update all your variables, right? So if for example, if you are using a specific data lake into there, and in test or the production, you want to use a different, you can provide as a variable, right, into your data source, right? And then from here, by using this same task, you can update that, right? And what it is using is like this task is using this SQL script that I have generated into the build pipeline, which is simply extracting from the different JSONs these. And let me quickly also show you, like if I have Synapse workspace and SQL scripts, right? And create external table JSON. And what this PowerShell script is doing, it's simply looking all the JSON within this folder that is for the serverless, right? And from there, it's actually getting this query only, right? And extract this query and then build this deploy underscore SQL script, right? And from by using that one, it's actually we are deploying it, right? So it's a combination of the few things, right? You use this PowerShell scripts that I've generated. It's look for the first like a drop external table definition, data source definition. It's getting all the things in a specific order, right? Because as I said, it's important to do it in a sequence. Otherwise, it's going to break if we are going to deploy with that order, right? Without that order, if you're going to do it's going to break it, right? So we need to make sure it's in a specific order, and that everything I'm taking care through this PowerShell script, right? So for serverless, we build by using this PowerShell script. We generate a deploy.sql script, and that SQL script is then in a release pipeline is going to be deployed into another stage with the same task, which is being used for the dedicated pool, and it's this one SQL Server UDEC deployment, right? So rest of the things are same, right? The only things you need to change is like if there is different variable, but yeah, these two things, right? You need to provide a SQL script, and the type of it is a SQL type, right? So rest of the things, obviously, you need Synapse. Serverless comes with a different endpoint, so you also need to change that one, right? But other than that, you just need to provide a SQL script, right? That you want to deploy it, right? And for the Spark part, it's 1 second. So deploy wheel job, right? So for the Spark, first we need to obviously build this wheel package, right? That's also part of like a CI pipeline or the build pipeline, which actually building this wheel package, right, in a Python, right? And then we are just finding that where it is, right? And then using this Synapse CLI, right? We are first going to upload that packages into Synapse Spark, right? Also, it's important, like you remove the old version and the packages to the Spark pool. It's not really important, but for the best practices, it's good you remove it, because otherwise, if you are going to keep, it's going to be like always when you start it, it's need to take care of those packages that you are going to deploy as a custom packages, right? So it's good to remove old version of that one, right? And only deploy the new run. So, and here it's doing a couple of things, right? One of them is actually removing the old packages, and other one is also if there is any requirements, right? That where you have some pip packages that are coming from either from some open source pip repo, so it can also deploy. If there is a dependency, you can use that and you can deploy that. I wanted to show the pipelines, how like in detail how it's going to be executed into my DevOps pipeline, but we only have the 5 minutes. I quickly want to touch the tooling part, right? If we still don't have any question, right? I can go back to the slides and quickly want to show you, say a couple of words about like if you are looking to get a local experience, right? Instead of working into the Synapse Studio, you want to work on your local machine, either with the Synapse Studio or with the Data Studio. You can use which one you should use it, right? And which have the more capabilities.
Yeah, we have no questions at the moment.
Okay, good. So I can go back to the slide part. Okay, yeah. So when we're talking about the IDEs or the code editor, right, we have the few options. Visual Studio, obviously, it's really good tool, right? But it's the most of the capabilities you get only in an enterprise or the business edition. Community edition doesn't have everything, right? So, but it's also only Windows like a favorite, but also Mac with limited capabilities, right? But it also have a good cloud integration, and the most important things that we are discussing today is it have an integral part SSDT in 2019 and 22 edition, right? But if you want to use more like a that's can work on every operating system. You don't want to have a dependency on a specific operating system, then Visual Studio Code is a way to go, right? It's a free, right? It can have a cross-platform installation, right? It can work with a multiple platform or the framework, right? In addition to that, it have a lot of plugin support, and also now provides the database projects in it, right? So you can have you can use these database projects within Visual Studio Code to do the same things you were doing in a Visual Studio, Enterprise Edition or the Business Edition, right? So you can use that, and it can work for you, right? For all the database projects, things like you can build a deck pack, you can even add the new things in it, right? I think at the moment only things is missing is a schema compare, right? And but other than that, it can work for you, and you can from there these database projects schema that you have on your local machine, you can commit it into the Git repo, right? If from here, if I just look into the Data Studio, right? Data Studio and the Visual Studio Code both have these database projects now, right? Both come with the, it is almost same, right? And both doesn't do the schema compare things, but other than that, they are the same, right? So if you want to use it and don't want to go for the schema compare again and again, this is a tool for you to go, right? Even another good thing in Visual Studio Code is like you can also work from Visual Studio Code on your Synapse Spark pools, right? So you can run your code from the notebook or the Python into the pool on a Synapse Spark, right? Even though you can work without Synapse Spark, pool, as I was discussing, it's open source Spark part. You can use it into your local environment on a Docker or something, right? Or if you're working in a Visual Studio Code, use a dev containers, right? And you can use them and do the development on a local, and then you can push your code as a packages to there. But if you want to work as a notebooks and I think and want to use a Synapse Spark clusters, you can use it from the this add-on that come with a Hive Spark integration within to the Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code can work for the deck pack or the database projects, right? Or in other like a database development. It can do all your PowerShell related things, all the scripting things. It can also do your notebook related things, because from there you can run it into the Synapse Spark, right? But on the other side, Data Studio can also have the database projects, but it still doesn't have these things to run the Synapse Spark thing. So if Spark is not a major part of your development, then might be Data Studio is a way to go, because here you can also do like a Git integration is there. You can also do work with the database projects. It's actually a database IDE, so all other things to connect to database, and that was already there from the some time. And the good thing about like a Data Studio and the Visual Studio is like they are the work on every operating system, right? You don't need to be stick only with the Windows, right? SQL Server Management Studio is nice, right? It's have a lot of management related things. If you are more like a in a DB related role, you can use it this one, but it doesn't have this thing related to database projects and also scripting related things. Either you want to just do something with PowerShell or something else, it's not there, right? That's what we are discussing for all the serverless part and for that thing. So if you want to do all those things that we have discussed and want to stick with the one ID, might be Visual Studio Code is a way to go, right? So I'm going to pause here. If there is any question, let me know. If not, thank you for joining today. And if you have any question, like I will try my best to post the code and everything if someone is interested, but you guys can reach out to me on a LinkedIn, right? I'm really active there, right? So yeah.
Cool, great. Thank you for that, Irfan. There were no questions in the chat, and we haven't picked up any online either. Thank you for that. That was really good explanation of what it is that you wanted to do, and some great tips and techniques. If you could, if the scripts are available somewhere in GitHub or something, and you could just drop us a line and we can share those out if you're happy to, or people can just connect with you online via LinkedIn. That would be great. So thank you for giving us an hour of your time today. That was I took a lot from that, and it's definitely food for thought and something to think on. Just let me stop the recording because cool.